Let's talk to a leading Canadian pollster for her insights into economic stability in Canada as it's experienced by individual Canadian voters and their preferences in the current electoral campaign. We're joined now by Shachi Kurl, president of the Angus Reid Institute. Shachi, thanks a lot for joining us. I've had some time to look at your most recent report, dated today, so it's brand new. One of the takeaways is that Canadians who feel they are struggling, and that's the term that your study uses, that they are struggling to make ends meet financially, are predominantly inclined to vote for the Conservative Party. However, that group of so-called struggling Canadians is getting a bit smaller. Why don't you elaborate?
Well, I think you've done a very good job of actually setting it up, Paul. Not sure how much more I can say, but basically, there's a few things to take away from this. People ask me all the time, Shachi, what is going on in terms of economic stress in this country? And this is an index that we've been tracking all the way back to a time 2 or 3 years ago where we really started to see inflation at the tail end of COVID taking off and then staying persistently high. What it did was it led us to understand and analyze the way Canadians fall into one of 4 groups. They're either comfortable or thriving, or they're uncomfortable and or struggling, one of those 4 groups. And the number of those who have been in each of those 4 categories have gone up and down as interest rates have gone up and down, as rental vacancy rates have become higher or lower with time. And so that group that is struggling, as we now start to see interest rates coming down, as we start to see higher levels of vacancy for renters, as we start to see grocery prices, if not come down significantly, at least taper or at least stabilize to an extent, the number of those who say that they're struggling has actually shrunk. So this is a group that once represented about 1/3 of the Canadian population. It's now down to about 1 in 4, about 25% of the Canadian population. And compare that to those who say that they're comfortable. That number has increased. The number who say they're thriving has more or less returned to where it was from 2 years ago. So when it comes to political preference, it's those who are still having the toughest time meeting those basic needs and necessaries, things like rent, like the mortgage payment, such as groceries and meeting their bills and their credit card payments, are more likely to be dialed into issues that the Conservatives are talking about around cost of living, around carbon taxation. Of course, today, April 1st, the federal carbon tax coming off and already off in a number of provinces as well. Although we have to see whether or not that's reflected at the till, businesses are going to have to figure that part of it out. So that is why we tend to see, the Conservatives, you just had the leader on, Pierre Poilievre, talking about cost of living issues as much as he is. It's a winner among his base. The challenge is he's got to grow his base. He's now, following the Liberals by about 8 points. The Liberals have an 8-point lead over the Conservatives. So he's got to make up some ground. Cost of living is a winner among motivated Conservative voters, but the bigger issue is how do you bring more people back into that tent when the issues that were bothering them or creating, a political mindset for them are starting to dissipate.
One of the questions that those of us who read about polls in the media have read about many times over the years, not only in this country, but in other countries as well, is the question of, are you better off economically now than you were several years ago? And indeed, that question has been asked in your most recent work. What do the results show?
Well, it does show that we're starting to see people with a little bit more optimism, not only about their current circumstances, but where they expect to be a year from now relative to what that looked like even a year ago, where people were saying that they were worse off now than they were a year ago, and they expect to be worse off a year from now. Again, that's stabilizing. It's not as though people expect to, in great grand numbers, expect to be far better off than they were a year ago or better off a year from now. But We're starting to see more Canadians say, you know, I'm about the same as where I was. So we're not seeing that level of deterioration. We're seeing a level of stabilization. The big question, Paul, in all of this is what comes of the tariff announcements tomorrow out of the White House and out of the Trump administration, and to what extent are Canadians drawing a direct line between their own level of economic household stress and what they perceive will be coming as a result of the tariffs that are announced as they are announced. So that is a big part of the unknown factor. So far, there's really been two narratives in this campaign. The Liberals have focused on the fact that they say they're the best party, and Mark Carney is the best leader to deal with the Trump administration. Pierre Poilievre has made the case that he's best on dealing with cost of living and inflation issues and household economic issues. At some point, those two issues are going to marry up. Whether that shift in the mindset of Canadians comes before or after E-Day, all we can do is continue to track over the next 4 weeks and see where voters are at.
Shachi Kurl, thank you a great deal for that. Shachi Kurl's president of the Angus Reid Institute, just today has published a report on